Evolution at Work, Underground Supplements, episode 28 coming your way. This is going to be a very important podcast. They're going to talk about how to run an effective PCT with supplement help. So, this one, we're going to go over what is a PCT, because a lot of people don't even know what it is. So, we're going to talk about what happens in PCT, what happens on cycle when you come off. We're going to talk about the best supplements for PCT. We're going to talk about quality control in the supplement industry. Mobster used to be a supplement owner. He knows a lot about this stuff. And he's going to talk about that. And he's going to tell you why there's so many variances in the supplement industry. We're also going to talk about why HCGenerate is the best supplement testosterone booster on the market. And we're going to explain why. And we're going to go over all the ingredients that are in it that make it so damn good. But first, let me remind everybody we are on Apple, we are on Spotify. We had a guy on the forum the other day saying, "Oh, yeah, I came on the forum because I was listening to you guys on Spotify." So that's good. We have the podcast on many platforms out there that do podcasts like this. But here's the thing, because of the stuff we talk about, we can't market our podcast. The algorithms hate us because of the stuff we talk about. The advertisers hate us because of the stuff we talk about. Obviously, it's a lot of underground stuff that they don't want to be involved in, and that's understandable. So we need your help to get this podcast more views. We need your help by commenting, by liking, by subscribing, by telling your friends and family. We're all about word of mouth on this podcast here. All right. We don't buy followers. We don't spend tens of thousands of dollars on a marketing team to market our podcast. So we're all about the ground up on this podcast. We bring you the best information on this stuff that no one else talks about. So we definitely need your help. So take the time to like, subscribe, comment, give us reviews and all that good stuff on all the platforms if you can. That would go a long way. So let's start off with what is PCT. So let me start this off by explaining the term PCT, and it stands for post-cycle therapy. And I remember when I first got into steroids in the 2000s, mid to late 2000s, and I started looking into them. PCT was a big thing by then. And to understand what recovery means, you have to understand what happens to your HPTA when you're on cycle. Your HPTA is your entire reproductive system, your pituitary glands, your Leydig cells, the other aspects of everything. The way your body produces testosterone, the way your body converts that testosterone to estrogen, feeds back into the pituitary glands. Then the pituitary glands produce the LH and the FSH, which stimulate your Leydig cells into producing testosterone. And that big circle keeps going and keeps rotating. It's like a hurricane, but it goes in the opposite direction in North America, the way a hurricane, the low pressure hurricane, well, this is high pressure. It spins the other direction and it goes. So we can do things in the PCT to help get that hurricane turning and getting it going in the right direction so your body can recover afterwards. And what happens is back in the day, I can, I looked into this and I talked to some people in the industry and who've been around a long time. These guys are now in their 80s and 90s even. And look, the PCT didn't even start until the mid 80s. And then it really fired up into the 90s. And this was around the time where steroid gurus started to come up with ideas to help recovery. So I'll bring in Mobster to talk a little bit of that because you know, he he knows the history. So
Yeah, I'm a
yeah,
historian. Yeah, yeah,
when do you
yeah.
think PCT really started, and tell us about the gurus of the 80s and 90s and how they
I would
started coming up
argue,
with
Steve,
theories?
that perhaps even later, because I've talked about on shows and on the forum one particular magazine back in the day that was kind of good with discussing testosterone ideas and theoretical things that we could do with PEDs and stuff like that was Bill Phillips' then magazine called Muscle Media 2000 or MM2K. And they would have the roundtable discussions with various experts, a couple of the names of people that we know, researchers, still at university, plus writers, and they would even do the whole visits to Mexico and stuff like that. You also got to remember, listeners, that I had a few small conversations and some emails with the late Paul Borison, and I've even been, as we say here in the UK, on the piss drinking all fucking day with Mick Hart, who's still with us. And Mick Hart and Paul Borison were the two at that time out there in the public arena steroid gurus. There was a couple of other fellas that were known within the industry. And I've got to be honest, Steve, the PCT concept as such, I don't recall seeing any decent, proper conversations about that. I went out and brought both Paul's first book, Anabolic Something or Other, and Mick's book, which was called The Layman's Guide. I think I got the second version, so I got Layman's Guide 2. And there were minimal mentions that I was doing my pre-steroid research. I had my head on, and I said, I'm going to go off and research what steroids I should do and what sort of dosages I should take. Exactly the same as our listeners are when they listen to our shows. They're kind of learning what they need to know in order to get the best from cycles, best from a PCT, and so on. And honestly, Steve, for whatever reason, and perhaps there's even an argument to be made for this now, the idea of being on cycle is sexy as fuck. It gets people's attention. The idea of making gains and being bigger and stronger gets people's attention. Traction, as we say in this day and age, hits up the algorithm. But the PCT thing doesn't. And it should. Yet at the same time, as Steve quite correctly says, for me, I'm going to say, and again, this is because when that magazine was around, you started, ironically, just started to see some suggestions around 2000. Again, this is out in the public arena. You've got online access. There's a little bit of information out there. Go back to the 70s, Stephen. You and I have talked about what we call the golden age with Arnold Schwarzenegger and the like, and the Mr. Olympia competition starting to enter the public consciousness and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And we know that the bodybuilders then, Arnold's talked about this on chat shows at that time, Barbara Walters springs to mind, literally being asked about steroids as though that was a hot topic that this rising, up-and-coming film star, media star, call Arnold what you will of them, and they sort of threw him under the bus a little bit, and he just smiled and laughed and said, yeah, I take steroids. And what they were doing in Gold's Gym at that time with Arnold and the rest of the crew, rumor has it that there was a local doctor. I was aware of doctors within that are fans of bodybuilding, supporting bodybuilders, and they were being monitored. They were being monitored for side effects. They were being given dosages of, as we know, some early testosterone. And you and I have discussed the lack of anabolic options, the very short list, the PEDs. And when we've done those shows, did we ever touch upon PCT? Did we fuck? Because it just wasn't discussed. I've literally got books that discuss these times in detail. I've mentioned before Randy Roach's Muscle, Smoke and Mirrors, and a couple of others that really get into it. I've literally sat down and spoke to, I forget this fella's name, and he was one of the guys that was running around with Arnold when they were cruising out in the limousine, in the Cadillac, in the whatever car, with the roof down, in New York, in California, and chasing chicks and going out for dinners and stuff like that. And again, so you get an insight into what was happening at that time, the protocols, and so on and so forth. And you and I, for example, said, Steve, when did AIs come to the fore? They wasn't using AIs because they didn't have any to use, or they wasn't aware that these drugs that they could use could be used as what we call AIs. PCT was not really on the table. And then what was it? It ended up being super basic. And we still see this as a kind of protocol when it's like HCG, HMG, clomid. That's it. And that's kind of like the simplest approach. We're also aware, when we talk about PCT, how, and I'll touch upon anabolic use again, how many people, especially once they get into using PEDs, almost struggle with the way that you feel on, quote unquote, feeling like Superman, going 100 miles an hour, doing absolutely fantastic things in the gym, and then struggling with the quote unquote come down. Now, we know that steroids don't give you a high, but it's that less than Superman. less than 100 miles an hour, less than killing it in the gym. And the reality of the situation is when we talk about PCT, I think Steve uses this phrase, and I'll bring him back in for this. When we talk about PCT, Steve uses the phrase soft landing and enabling your body to recover. And the reason why we encourage a PCT and the reason why we encourage recovery is because arguably, Steve, if you do that, you've got the whole issue of young guys maintaining fertility as much as possible. We've done shows specifically on fertility, but I would actually argue that for the most part, and myself included, I would argue that the coming off, doing a PCT, enabling full recovery, actually, in my mind, enables your gains to stick, to use that phrase, and also that especially if you think in the long term, as I have done, training for the length of time that I've been training for, same as Steve, who's getting up there in terms of how long he's been lifting, I would actually argue that we found benefits to it. The idea of not doing a PCT, cruising, maintenance doses, etc., 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 and having that muscle stick versus doing a full PCT, allowing your body to recover, almost, to use a phrase I saw Rick down the other day, Steve, slightly out of context, but reset, and then keeping the gains that you got from that cycle and then moving forward to the next gains and the next gains and so on.
Yeah.
So there's a huge argument. Talk about what you say when you mean soft landing, Steve, in terms of the
Yeah, we're gonna get to that in a second, but let's stick to let's get back on the topic here of the history, and you mentioned AIs, you mentioned hormones like ACG, HMG, you didn't mention SERMs, and Clomid and Novadex were very instrumental when it came to PCT. Now, the ironic thing is,
yes.
yeah, let me say when I lost my train of thought. So let me say this. Clomid came on the market in the late 60s. Novalix came around in the late 70s. So these things were there. These things were there for guys in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now, why didn't they start using them to the late 80s? Now, a big reason why is that perhaps a few guys actually knew about these, but it was highly unlikely that they figured out they could use them. Look, a big reason is they were ignorant on blood work and they were ignorant on how the HPTA works. So these guys that you were talking about, Mobster from Muscle Media magazine in the 80s, are they idiots? Yes, in a way, because they pretended to be gurus on this stuff, but in reality, they didn't know shit. Because if they knew shit, they would have already been talking about, yeah, Clomid works in PCT, Novadex works in PCT. I'm going to get into how they work in a second, but they didn't have access to blood work in those days like we do today. Today, you can run blood work and the next day see your results right there in black and white. So you can run Clomid for 2 weeks during PCT and see that, oh my God, my LH is bouncing back, my FSH is bouncing back, my testosterone levels are bouncing back, my estrogen's coming down. Same thing with Novadex. They didn't have access to that. So how are they supposed to figure this out in those days? They were ignorant. They didn't know about the stuff the way we do today. So it's one of those things where it took a long time for people to figure this shit out. By the late 80s, I don't know how. I tried to look this up. I couldn't figure out how. I think it was just through networking, through bro science at the gym, whatever. Guys finally figured out in the late 80s, hey, we can use Novadex in that during our PCT, and that made a difference. So that's when guys started to figure it out. Now, in the golden era, like you talked about, what would they do during the golden era? What would guys like Arnold do? Is they would just time their cycles around their competition. So in the off season, they'd run something like Dianabol, and then ahead of their competition, they'd run things like Primobolan to get really, really rock solid and hard. They didn't have access to the ancillaries that guys had access to later. They didn't know about them. These doctors that they were working with, Mobster, they didn't come up with the idea that, hey, you can run these steroids like testosterone and high doses of Dianabol and get results.
Yeah, let me just touch on two things. Steve's quite correct about Novadex. And I was trying to think as Steve was talking, I literally looking at the calendar here, Steve, counting back. So my first cycle would have been 2002. I tried to work it out. I think it was 37. If you go back 25 years, that would make me 35. So 2002, I'm going to say. And yes, Novadex was around. Here's what I think happened, Steve. And I mentioned the roundtable stuff. And Steve's quite correct in terms of the networking. You are literally looking, and we know the name of one of these people, going to university library, going through the various research studies and the published essays and dissertations, sitting there with pen and paper and writing this shit down. What was your average doctor, including no doubt the doctors that were treating the bodybuilders, who would have had the same access, even in the 70s, to some of the data that was available by the pharmaceutical companies. But for the most part, when it comes to doctors, and even doctors now, they will have done some part of their MD, GP, 10-year becoming a doctor study. And I believe one day, I think it's literally one day in 10 years, it's done on steroids. Be some portion of that 10 years done on blood work and endocrinology in terms of the hormones in our body. What's changed is online access to that same university data, this medication already existed. And as we discussed on another show recently, in a couple of shows recently, the bodybuilding mentality to see that a medication is out there and wonder whether that medication can benefit me as a bodybuilder, or in this case, specifically this case, benefit me in the form of
but the problem
psychotherapy.
we
But
have,
it's all around 2000, Steve, when the internet kind of took hold and people could start to see this stuff for themselves.
yeah, but we have access to all that, and people are still fucking up their PCTs left and right, all over the place. Why? Because it's also such thing as TMI, too much information. And the guys, especially those guys that Euro's talking about, Mobster, they're the guilty. They're the ones that are guilty of that. They're spreading so much bad information out there, and so
Yes.
much outdated information.
Let me jump in for a second here just to
But
defend exactly what you've just said there, Steve. Have you and I not had an argument? It was an argument, a vigorous debate, shall we say, with one particular person who shall remain nameless, that we had on the forums, and he hated it if we contradicted an idea that he'd had in 1980 and 1990 and 2000, and he would not change his fucking mind,
yeah,
even if you gave him research. So yeah,
even
that's
the blood
sometimes what
work,
we
even
do.
the blood work showing
Yes, yes,
something would not change their mind because it's ego, it's narcissism, it's ego. And we get a lot of that in bodybuilding, and that keeps us from advancing in bodybuilding. Is the ego and the narcissism in the industry, and that's why it took them 20 years, 25 years to figure out Clomid works good in PCT. Why it took them 15 years to figure out Novodex works in PCT because they were so fucking. So you still have guys today recommending Letro as an AI because they are so backwards and behind everything, and they don't understand that there's something called aromacin which has come around, which blows Letro away. Aromacin is a suicide AI. Letro is not. Aromacin boosts your IGF-1. Letro does not. Aromacin is a gentle AI with side effects. Letro is not. But they're still recommending Letro because the ego and the narcissism, they refuse to update themselves. So that's very important. And we have to, if we're going to be successful at anything in life, we have to be willing to move on. It's just like a football coach who does the same thing year in and year out and refuses to change. And then these other coaches come and they blow him away, and their teams are so much better because he refused to evolve. You have to evolve with everything in bodybuilding, otherwise you're going to get stuck behind. And those that did get stuck behind, they unfortunately they're done. They're cooked. And I have zero respect for these people. So let's get into, speaking of Novodex and Clomid, let's get into what they are and why they're a good idea in PCT, along with the supplements that we're going to talk about shortly. So Novodex and Clomid, they're both SERMs, selective estrogen receptor modulators. And what they do, as I talked about earlier, when it comes to your HPTA, think about a big circle. Now, the SERMs will actually block the estrogen from feedbacking into the pituitary glands. And you're like, oh my God, how can that be a good thing? Well, it's a good thing because it's manipulating your pituitary glands and forcing your pituitary glands to start producing hormones when it normally would not. So that's why they're good options in PCT. So you're going to get a soft landing, as Mobster pointed out earlier, when you run these SERMs along with your natural supplements. Originally, back in the 80s and early 90s, a lot of guys would say, you know what, let's just slam our estrogen. They came up with it. That was one of the earliest theories on PCT, Mobster, was let's slam estrogen. Because if you slam estrogen, testosterone levels will go up. And that is true. You will absolutely notice improvement in your testosterone levels if you get estrogen down. But is that the most effective way to do it? It is not. Because what happens is if you slam estrogen, you're also going to deal with a lot of side effects, and it's going to have a negative effect
Yeah,
on your PCT, and you're not going to feel good. You're going to feel really, really bad. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep estrogen levels balanced. So these SERMs are much more effective than using an AI for that reason. And the ironic thing is the SERMs, Clomid was been around since the late 60s, but they still were recommending to use an AI in PCT before they were recommending SERMs. Again, it's the narcissism, it's the egomaniacs in the industry. Now, another thing came up, and you mentioned just is HCG, then HMG, and these are more hormone mimicking. These are mimicking hormones when you take them. And what happens is we see guys who are pushing this. Rich Piana pushed this one for years. I think one of his videos on this has like 2 or 3 million views, Mobster. And this is what I was talking about. People giving bad information, getting all the clicks. And he would recommend using HCG and PCT. Now, the problem with using HCG and PCT is because it is a hormone that mimics your hormones. Okay. You're basically delaying recovery by taking it. But because you feel better on it, people think that it's doing them a favor. But what happens is when you stop taking it, you crash. So it's keeping your pituitary glands suppressed. Because why would your pituitary glands produce hormones when it's detecting that something is mimicking hormones already? It's not going to do that. So it makes more sense to run the SERMs instead and not take a hormone that's mimicking your hormone, because what happens is when you mimic your hormones, it's just going to delay your recovery. So big mistake, any of you out there who are using HCG or HMG and PCT, you need to stop doing that. It's only damaging. And one of the things I noticed back in the day on the forums in the 2000s is people would say, I'm noticing when I run ACG that I'm not recovering as good. Or they'll say, it's taking me longer to recover. I wonder if my body's getting used to ACG. They have all these theories behind it, and none of that is true. What's actually happening is the first part is true, what they said, but not the second part, and that they're actually delaying recovery. So it'd be like just taking testosterone in your PCT or any anabolic steroid in your PCT. It's just going to delay the recovery process. You have to come off all your hormones. You have to come off all your hormones for your body to start recovering. It's very, very important. So there's a lot of outdated and bad information out there in
yeah,
PCT. And it's a big
yeah,
reason why so many people are on TRT at a really young age, because they're not running their PCT correctly. And let me just add this. Supplements are extremely important in PCT with these SERMs, because these SERMs do come with side effects. A lot of people complain about side effects on Clomid. There's funny posts over the years where people say, I'm crying on Clomid, I feel weepy. A commercial comes on that makes me sad, or a movie comes on that makes me sad, and I'm crying, I'm bawling like a little baby. And they laugh about it like it's funny. Well, that's not correct. That's not a correct PCT, guys. You're running too much of it. I've seen some ridiculous protocols on Clomid. I've seen people run 300 milligrams a day to start. That's a mistake. Clomid should never be ran more than 12.5 milligrams a day. That's it. And if you want to run at 25 milligrams every other day, you don't need to run it at a high dose. And you also need to run a strong testosterone booster with them. That is mandatory, because you have to balance the side effects. A lot of people complain on Nolvadex, oh, I have erectile problems on Nolvadex. Well, it's because you're blocking estrogen from feedbacking, and you need to take a natural testosterone booster to offset that erectile issue or those libido issues that you get on Nolvadex. Same thing can happen on Clomid. So it's very, very important that you balance your PCT. You run your SERMs, low dosing, but you also run a strong testosterone booster with that to offset the side effects. Go ahead, Mobster, and then we're going to
yeah.
move on to the
I just
supplement.
made some notes while Steve was talking, right? And this is commenting on what Steve just said and agreeing in for the most part, probably all of it, Steve. This is idea of feeling good versus actually recovering. I would argue that the recovery is more important. That is precisely why you're doing a PCT. So there might be times when it's a little bit less, as I said earlier on, than feeling like Superman. Fine. You this is the journey, this is what you've chosen to do. Doesn't mean you're going to feel terrible. It just means you're not going to feel fucking elite. You're just going to feel normal. Okay. So recover. The other one is the HCG, Stephen. We've discussed this on the forums and on these kind of shows when we said where HCG come from. Is it HCG? Remind me, Steve, or HMB? I think it's HCG from fucking pregnant women's piss.
Yeah.
And
It's pregnant women piss
yeah,
that's synthesized in a lab. A lot of people
yes,
don't
it
believe
is.
that. A
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
people
yeah,
think that's full shit, but that's actually what it is. So essentially, you can take a pregnant woman's piss and inject it, and that is what HCG is.
yeah,
Except they
yeah.
make it in a lab into a peptide form. Yeah.
Just as an aside, Steve, and I remember this from years ago, and this is one of those things that people don't talk about how graphic this shit is, but it's useful for research. I believe the companies that empty sanitary towel bins out use some of the hormones found in the sanitary towel after it's been used for medical purposes. And I believe another one back in the day, they would go to a nunnery and pay the chief, I've forgotten what the chief nun's called, abbotess or whatever, and buy the urine from them and it wasn't for tanning purposes using leather, which can be any kind of urine, but it's if normal animals, but they were using this hormone for something else. Listen, we've seen people come up with this idea, and this is not even in PCT, that if they crush their estrogen, their testosterone ratios will be so high that they will get anabolic-like effects. And we know that's not true. I would argue here, just to finish on this particular point here, Steve, blood test, blood test, blood test. I would rather you do a blood test and see that recovery is taking place and not feel superhuman than and understand that recovery is happening versus feeling great but not actually be recovering. So yeah, some of the stuff that we've discussed, Steve, is where people are taking what might be argued as a too aggressive approach to a PCT versus just doing it properly, taking a little bit more time and getting the result you want at the end. On to the next bit.
So let's get into supplements now to use in PCT. And I talked about using a strong testosterone booster. It's extremely important. It's extremely mandatory. Otherwise, it's just not going to go smooth. And as Mobster said, that's a good point he made. You're not going to feel like you feel like on cycle and PCT no matter what you do. And if you do, then you're doing it wrong. Okay. The idea for PCT is give you a soft landing so you can stay motivated. You can keep most of your gains. You can keep most of your strength and you can recover properly. This way, you don't fry your reproductive system off a steroid cycle. So, zinc, number one, believe it or not, this mineral is important to supplement to help you produce testosterone in the first place. If you have no zinc, you have no chance to recover at all. We see a lot of people in America with low testosterone levels. And one of the reasons why, there's many reasons, but one of the reasons why is they're not getting proper nutrition because of all the processed junk. So, zinc is very, very important because with zinc, you're going to get you're going to get these things that happen. And some of the best sources of zinc are vegetables, which Americans don't eat. You go to any grocery store, Monster, unless it's a health food store, you see a very barren produce section for vegetables because nobody buys them. So supermarkets, why would they bring vegetables in if no one is buying them? They're just going to sit on the shelf and go bad. Eggs are another option. Um, Nuts, seeds are another option. Shellfish are another option. And then you've got things like some seafood, other seafood options. Red meat and poultry are also good options. But again, if you're eating processed junk, if you're eating chicken from Chick-fil-A, that's not going to have zinc, okay? It's all processed junk. It's not even a real chicken. It's like fried and peanut oil. It's absolute crap, okay? So it's going to actually take zinc out of your body instead of putting it in, ironically. So you want to make sure that you're eating a proper diet, but you're also supplementing with zinc. Very, very important. Mobster, anything you want to say on zinc?
Yeah, well, I've zinc is fantastic for healing, Steve. And again, we are stressing our bodies, of course, when we hit the gym. And I mean, I've told the story before about the little trick that you could do with zinc just to boost your temporarily by overdosing it to a higher than normal dose for a few days. And on a Friday and a Saturday, or sorry, say Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Steve, and then go and have, as I called it, one hell of a Saturday night. Uh, and I actually got a couple of buddies to try that one. So here's another one, Steve, Fedosia. And Fedosia, you need to make sure, I'm going to touch upon this briefly, making sure that it's the right form of Fedosia. So, for example, in the product that we're going to discuss, it's the stem. And I looked at a bunch of research studies, and ironically, one particular study that I mentioned, so the place that I looked at was arguing about whether or not Fedosia works. And then they did refer to a study using my Steve, where it says based on the magnitude of benefit in rodents, one of the more potent herbs for increasing both testosterone and libido. So ironically, their decision it didn't work, and then literally they discussed three different places where the research suggested it did. So I think they kind of got their ass about face. Talks about boosting ejaculation latency, time to ejaculation was another one, Steve, and even having anti-malarial and other benefits in terms of your overall health. So
Yeah,
yeah, what about that?
it's gonna make your balls bigger. That's not your imagination. And a lot of people say, "Oh, I need to use HCG because it makes my balls bigger." You don't have to use HCG. Nature put certain things out there for us, and people discover this. Fedosia has been around many, many decades, even 100, 200 years even, and they knew how good Fedosia was when it comes to making your balls bigger. When you use steroids, your balls shrink. I talked about earlier the reproductive damage that you're doing. So you can take Fedosia and PCT. You can even take it on cycle. Works great for plumping up your
How about
balls.
this, Steve? This was literally a 5 day study, and it was a twofold boost in testosterone with 18 milligrams a kilogram, threefold with 50 milligrams a kilogram, and sixfold with 100 milligrams a kilogram. And again, this was just in mice. Can you imagine a sixfold increase in your natural testosterone levels in 5 fucking days, Steve?
Yep, and especially it's going to especially be good in PCT when your testosterone levels are diving. So next one we're talking about is 3,4-divinol. This is one of the best supplements out there that you may have never heard of, and it does a great job of binding to SHBG. So when you're on PCT, the hormones of your cycle are coming out of your system. You need to boost your free testosterone. That's very, very important. So that's the perfect time to use 3,4-divinol because any amount of testosterone when you start bouncing back is going to be magnified because you're going to be having more free testosterone because of its ability to bind to SHBG. So of all the supplements out there, this is the one you want to use. And it works great on cycle as well because binding to SHBG on cycle will make your cycle run better as well. It'll make the steroids look better. Tribulus is the next one. This one has been used for a long time to help male hormones rise. It contains something called sapins, and these will increase DHT and testosterone, which has a domino effect in the body. So this is a great option in PCT right there when your DHT and when your testosterone are taking a dive and you need something to bounce. Tell us a little about Tribulus, Mobster. I know you know a lot about it.
Yeah, and again, make sure you're using the standardized version. And again, the product we're discussing has a standardized minimum of 95%, which comes from stinging nettle extracts. I have mentioned this before, Steve. So the Bulgarian research on this is deep. This is where we all started to get the idea of using tribulus from. Yeah, the plant they were using had to come from a certain part of the world. So that stuff that comes from other places at that time was piss poor and didn't give you the same results. They made sure to use a standardized product. I think it was actually less than 95% at that time. And this was because of the testing by the IOC at the Olympic Games and big athletic competitions, because the Bulgarians at that time were part of the whole communist bloc. And so they needed something that was going to boost testosterone in their athletes when they were being tested for steroids. So using less drugs or no steroids at all and still maintain a high level of testosterone. And once they found this particular plant, as Steve said, historically, realizing you needed a standardized extract, tested it on their athletes, and got great fucking results, Steve, just for performance on the field of athletics, so running, throwing, discus, javelin, short distance stuff, etc., etc. Some of the power athletes. And once that hit the fucking market, it sold like gold dust. And the only issue, as I touched upon briefly, was, and we will talk about this as well, the sometimes you wasn't getting what you paid for. You wasn't getting the same quality of material. You wasn't getting the same source of material. That has improved, but at the time, the variation between what one company was using or the researchers and what was available to the market was huge. So it was one of those ingredients that was put into a lot of products, low dose, not at the effective dose, not at the dose in the study, and 100% not the same fucking quality, Steve, which we'll touch upon as well. I want to talk a little bit about, sorry, you go on.
Yeah, I was gonna go to Tomcat Ali. I'm not sure if that's the next one you wanted to talk about, but this one is great for energy and muscle building. It's also been shown to help the reproductive system and boost fertility at the time you need it most. So this is a great option. A lot of people say, "Well, I don't care about fertility, Steve." Well, you should, because here's the thing: if your fertility levels are low, then that's going to mean your HPTA and your reproductive system aren't running up to speed. Okay. And that's not what you want in PCT. You want your fertility to start bouncing back. That's a really, really good sign. And that helps everything else work a lot better. So it's very, very important if you want to recover properly, which is one of the prime reasons we do PCT, to be using Tongkat Ali. And it's a very, very good supplement. We've seen a lot of supplements these days get put Tongkat Ali in their product profile because it has been shown to be very effective. Anything you
Yeah,
want to
I was
add?
going to,
Go ahead.
no, not on that particular one, but we'll talk about something that the supplement industry does shortly. So fenugreek was the one I was thinking of, Steve. This is a herb, and no argument about boosting testosterone here. Make sure that you get the 50% saponins from the seed. I'll talk about other ingredients later. Um, Bunch of studies here, Steve. I'll just read one out. It's an older study, 300 milligrams of fenugreek twice a day for 8 weeks. And this is the line that you should pay attention to, led to significant increases in testosterone levels. And it specifically applies to our listeners here. In men, when combined with resistance training, participants also experienced a reduction in body fat, fantastic, of course, compared to the control group without any decrease in muscle strength. So how about fucking that, guys? And there's a bunch of other studies that I can quote here: 138 participants, 300 milligrams. Compare the one was taking 600 milligrams as a supplement, and those that were taking a placebo, and literally uh, randomly assessed. It's one of those blind research things, Steve, where the researchers don't even know what you're getting. And then obviously they go back and look at, and I'll quote the end from it. The summary was they also had a measurable increase in testosterone concentration, as well as a decrease in body mass and body fat, but an increase in lean mass. And that was just so not only are you recovering from your testosterone cycle, you're actually boosting your muscle mass, getting leaner, and boosting your testosterone, Steve. And that's just in fenugreek.
More we want to talk about here boron, which is a great option to make the whole body run better, and it's a great option in any supplement stack. So if you're stacking a bunch of things together, adding boron will make everything work better. And then vitamin E is a very important one. Vitamin E has been shown with Clomid to boost fertility in men. It's literally the only study that we have today. Okay, I don't care what anybody tells you, it is the only proven, properly done study, and it was in the Egyptian study, that showed that it actually boosts fertility in men when you stack vitamin E and Clomid together. So great, great option to help protect muscles at a crucial time when the body wants to get rid of them. And that is a great idea during PCT because that's when you're muscle wasting the most. Now, what product do you think contains all of these great ingredients that we've talked about, and which product actually contains a proper amount? And some of the things that Mobster talked about, making sure it's the right type of supplement, and that is HCGenerate. It's all in one formula. It's been used for the past 15 years, one of the top selling natural testosterone boosters on the market. I use it in my PCT, 100% mandatory to use it. The guy, listen, at the end of the day, we've seen so many guys over the years who have loved it. Even women will use it. Um, on, solo, or they can use it too in their PCTs, even though their PCTs are completely different than men. They don't have an HBTA like we do, but they'll still use it in PCT because it's so effective for them as well and gives them that on feeling when they come off. And look, at the end of the day, we got to make sure that we're using a good quality supplement. So I'm going to give Mobster, a good 5 minutes to get into the supplement industry and how it works with the quality
Yes.
control.
Right. So Steve suggested in the pre-show, I'm going to start with this, the price point. Okay. One of the comments that someone complaints, and it's not really a complaint as such. Okay, why does HCGenerate cost the amount of money that it does? Okay, so we've done comparisons in the past on previous shows where products were made to a price point. And I'm thinking about the organ protector here, Steve. And typically, I believe there's kind of like mental blocks for customers that market researchers have gone out and done and said, look, there's a $30 price point, there's a $50 price point, and then looking at the product that we're discussing, there's a $100 price point. And you know that the $100 price point is going to be a premium product. But other companies, they kind of scares them having a $100 price point, Steve. And so they sell a cheaper product, which really means that's silly, because it means in order to get an effective dose, because you've done your research, you're listening to the show, in order for you to get a product that actually contains a dose that was shown in a study to work, using a sourced ingredient of the quality that was shown to work in the study, you're going to have to take 2 times the dosage. So you buy 2 fucking tubs instead of 1 tub, or whatever it is that you need for the length of your recovery in PCT. Then we get into stuff like Tribulus was a great example, Steve, and I've used this on other shows. So every so often, company will come up with a new form of creatine when creatine was a huge deal, and of course it still is. Or the colostrum as a protein was a huge deal for a while. And then you go back to the study and you say, how much was used of this ingredient? Let's call it ingredient A in the study, and it was 20 milligrams. So companies want to have that ingredient in their product, but it's fucking expensive. And now, because everybody's talking about it, there's a scarcity of it. So they can't afford to put 20 milligrams into the product. A lot of people still buy it at the price point. So they'll stick 5 milligrams in, but they'll put a big fucking thing on the advert and a huge thing on the side of the tub, Steve, contains product Y, contains product X, contains the product that everybody's talking about, but it won't be at an effective dose. It won't be useful, really. It just makes people go and buy it. And then you get into the stuff like, I use this as an example, and I actually called this company out back in the day, where a UK company talking about colostrum, Steve, claiming that their product per serving contained something stupid like 90 grams. And at that time, wholesale price of colostrum was $100. I might even been £100, so more than $100 per kilogram. But the serving, when I worked out the price of the product and then did the serving, was the equivalent of £2.70. So you go, hang on, the fucking colostrum alone would cost more, close to £9, which is about $12. And this is back in the day, per serving, based on what they were claiming their product had. So look, this happens all of the fucking time. You and I have looked at an organ protecting product, Steve, that cost $4 and they literally brought the rights to, or claimed the rights to, a huge organ protecting product named back in the day. And they were doing this as a company based in India. And it was like somewhere between $4 and $5 a ton. So I think you said at the time, it was for grannies. It wasn't for hard training athletes. The dosages weren't effective. The idea that the $5 product, and this would be a month's fucking supply, that's not even the price of a bottle of vitamins. This happens all the time. So just to finish, and just to give you the listeners another example, I literally myself spoke to this company owner, and this was when we were looking at perhaps using him to source a protein product rather than the way that we ended up going with my own company. He'd sat down and spent a long time developing a computer program where you could put in the price point, and he would develop a product based on the price that you wanted to pay him for 100 tubs, 200 tubs, 1,000 tubs, whatever. And I would see PCs, when they started to become a thing, selling protein products for less than the rest of the market, but claiming that theirs was a premium product. So how you go, okay, so someone that's only bought 100 tubs, five, six, £700, $1,000, whatever, was selling their product for less than everybody else in the market, all the big name companies with hundreds of tons of protein at a time, and they were selling this for less. And I knew that this person had this company, and you would have, for example, protein listed in a weird way inside of brackets, outside of brackets, on the label. And I knew that his company would be for soy concentrate, not an isolate, the bakery grades, low grade whey protein concentrates, 20, 30, 40, 50% instead of 80, or isolate 90, and other ingredients done in such a way that he could produce, if you wanted him to, a product to such a low price point for you to buy 100 tubs that you could. And he was also, was another trick, Steve, he would sell you the labels separately so that he wasn't sending out and wasn't breaking the law by making label claims, but he would print these labels that you wanted him to as a separate thing via another company, which he owned. And then the labels would come in one box and the protein would come in another box. And it was down to you if you lied by putting this great label onto a piss poor product. And the idea that this doesn't happen is a joke. We've talked about the FDA, just to finish this thought process here, Steve. The FDA is supposed to protect us in this kind of industry and the supplement industry as a whole. And I don't just mean bodybuilding supplements. I'm talking about supplements for the mass market out there for mum and pup people, whatever, just the general public buying vitamins and so on. The reality of the situation is with the FDA and similar organisations in the UK is that they are testing ham, beef, sausages, biscuits, breakfast cereals, and they can't really, budgetary wise, just sheer number of staff, get to every single aspect of the supplement industry. There are companies, and this has happened many times, getting better because we are more likely to point out when they're fucking up now. But Steve, but how many times did we see back in the day, company would come on to the industry, smash the fuck out of the marketing, have adverts in every bodybuilder magazine, talk a huge fucking game, and last 1 or 2 years, then the company would fold, they would sell, they would take their money out of the company, they start a new company with another bunch of shit products and do this again and again and again. And we've also even talked about one show, just to finish again, and I'm thinking particularly of one particular person who ended up going to jail, as we know. It was very big, very fast growing, fantastic company to begin with. And he ended up getting drunk and high and fucking up big time and just doing stupid fucking shit. And what's the most recent one? The Liver King being called out for claims that he's been making on his products, and literally employees of his company have been outing him. That's just in the last couple of months, Steve, claiming that the stuff was super organic, super grass fed, kind of even suggesting it was, cows that live on the side of a fucking mountain somewhere. And they said it was just impossible for this to be true. And they pointed out it wasn't true. And even they literally went to company directors, CEOs, and other executive officers at the company and were told to keep quiet. And that information is out there on the internet for you to look at. I'm not making this shit up. So it's just really, really poor. It's why we talk about products like HCGenerate, and we know what's gone into them, Steve. We know the work, we know the quality of the materials. And just to quote something that you said on other shows, we have literally seen blood tests for people using the products like HCGenerate when we talk about it, and showing on those blood tests the changes that we discuss when we talk about this show. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, the FDA, a few years ago they were testing up to 4%. Then COVID hit. And then now it's down to 1%. So basically, supplements that you see being sold at Walmart, GNC, Target, online, Amazon, whatever, we're talking about 1% or less of the supplements are even tested by the FDA. So at the end of the day, these supplement owners know this. So for them, they can cheat like hell and hope they don't get caught. And even if they do get caught, as Mobster said, they just will file bankruptcy, shut the company down, and then move on to a new one. and start up a new one a year later. I mean, that's just the game. These guys are shady. These are businessmen. They're not people who are there to help you. They're just shady ass businessmen. The CEO of GNC, you really think this guy gives a shit about you? He's got fucking a yacht and fucking sports cars and a big ass fucking mansion, sends his kids to private school, all this fancy shit. What do you think he gets the money from? He gets the money from ripping you off. So you cannot trust these supplement owners and supplement companies, especially the ones that are flashy and make millions of dollars and all this stuff. Because where are they making all that money from? They're making it stealing from you and grifting off of you. So anytime you're on Instagram and you see these fitness models and celebrities pushing a certain product, just know they're being paid to push the product. It's marketing. It's marketing. The nice thing about HCGenerate is they don't do that shit. They don't pay off athletes to market their product. They basically are word of mouth. And this is why HCGenerate has been around over 15 years, 20 years. I think it's been around since like 2005. So it's 20 years it's been around. Why? Because it works and people keep coming back. It's a 99% retention rate of customers. Mobster mentioned about these supplement companies, they last a year or two, then they go bankrupt, they leave. Why? Because people buy their products, realize their products are crap, and never buy it again. So the company has to fold because they're not getting any more sales and they made the money that they wanted off of suckers and then they move on. Well, HCGenerate and N2BM, which produces HCGenerate, they don't work like that. They work on customers who keep coming back, loyal customers who keep coming back. And that's the way their business model is. And you're not going to become a multimillionaire as a supplement owner doing that. That's just the facts. But you are going to keep a loyal following and you're going to put out a product that you can be proud of. And that's what HCGenerate is all about. So, how do we run HCGenerate now in PCT? I already talked about what to run in PCT and what not to run PCT earlier. So you guys know a lot, you know that as well. Testosterone booster like HCGenerate, high quality. It's got the ingredients. Mobster talked about what you want to look for in a supplement product. HCGenerate has you covered. It is the best testosterone booster right now in the world, period. And you look at what's in it and you look at the ingredients and you try it out, you'll know that. If your balls are the size of raisins, take HCGenerate. I guarantee you, within a week or two, your balls will be much, much bigger. They'll plump up. And that shows you right there that the ingredients are high quality. So how do we use HCGenerate? So in PCT, you're going to get a bottle. It's going to last you a month using 5 capsules a day. That's a serving size. Most popular way to use it would be splitting up one serving in the AM, one in splitting up the one serving AM and PM. So you wouldn't take 5 AM, 5 PM. You would take 2 or 3 AM and then 2 or 3 PM. That's the way most people do it. Now, another way, you could take the whole serving for the day just in one shot. 1 or 2 hours before sex or before the gym. That will give you a little boost for that. So a lot of people like to switch it back and forth. On non-workout days, you take 2 or 3 caps morning, two or 3 caps evening. On workout days, take the full 5 caps 1 or 2 hours beforehand. It's easy to digest. It's not anything that's going to upset your stomach. These are natural herbals that are found in nature and very, very high quality. So you're wasting your time using these other testosterone boosters that are half the price because you're going to have to run, as Mobster said, 10 times the dose to get the same amount of stuff in HCGenerate. And a lot of their products, a lot of these other products, they don't even have the proper ingredients. It's just a bunch of crap that they market and they pay these Instagram phonies money to promote them on their page. And that is the grift that it's all about. Mobster?
Just look at one thing, Stephen. Literally, just as you were talking, I looked this up to be sure, right? So I'll go back to fenugreek again, right? The study that I mentioned earlier on refers to 600 milligrams having a boost and in the testosterone and the retention of muscle tissue and the drop in the body fat. Remember? So what am I looking at here on the HCGenerate, Steve? 1,000 milligrams. And what about what Steve said? Every single ingredient here, Steve, has the little bit in brackets afterwards when it talks about the specific form that you're getting. Zinc, a zinc amino acid chelate. Fadosia agrestis, stem, the fenugreek, I mentioned already, the standardized minimum 50% saponins. What I want listeners to do Go to your mom and pa supplement store. Go online. Open up a couple of tabs on your computer, on your tablet, whatever, and look at products that claim to be the be all and end all, and look down the ingredient list. Then to the right hand side, see if ever one of the just a panel open with the research on a couple of. Don't even have to look at all the ingredients which we've discussed. Just pick a couple like I did earlier, and look at the form. Look at how whether or not it's standardized, and look at the dosage. And tell me, Steve, I know the answer. If they get themselves a nice $30 or $50 product, it can't, it literally can't have the effective dosing. It might have maybe the effective dose of one ingredient, but it cannot have the effective dose of all of the ingredients for $30 or $50. It just can't. Or look at the form. Does it mention the form? I've said before on one show that we did, Steve, if you want one particular part, you want the fruit. If you want another ingredient, it has to be the leaf. If it's another ingredient, it has to be the stem. And that's just when it's a herb. It has to be those forms. When we have a potato, we're not eating the fucking stem or the leaf or the flower. We're having the fucking root, the tuber. We wouldn't eat the rest because the rest isn't a fucking potato. When we're looking at these ingredients, it has to be the right form. It has to be, at best, a standardized form of that particular part of the plant when we're discussing herbals. It must be that. If they don't list that, why? Is it because they were lazy with the label? Maybe. But I would actually argue, Steve, that a lot of the time it's because they know damn well, and I think I used Tribulus as an example before, that they haven't got the fucking quality in there. Look, there's an industry thing again, and I've mentioned this on other shows. So I've got the research stuff here, the history of the iron game, call it what you will. And I think Randy Roach's Must Smoke and Mirrors. I've got the full set, Steve, book 1, book 2, and book 3. Book 3 is specifically about the supplement industry and nutritional changes, and even some of the legislation that came along in the 60s and 70s, and also some of the medical stuff at the same time. And what he specifically mentions in there is that there's really only 4 or 5 big name that you've never heard of formulation companies in the States, and a couple over here, 1 or 2 big protein suppliers to the food industry as a whole, including bodybuilders in the United Kingdom. There's only a handful. And some of those companies are owned by guys that are fucking shit on research. Shit hot, sorry, on research. Really, really, really good. Big name reputations, if you know. So the man that reads a bodybuilder magazine or goes online or watches YouTube videos, you'd never heard of these fucking geezers. But if you own a supplement company, you know your shit, you say, this guy is really, really good at his stuff. He knows his shit. But
Can you
for the
imagine?
most part,
Can you
yeah.
imagine his kids? He named his kid his first male son, Randy Roach. He named his first male son Cock. So can you imagine in class, like when they're naming off roll, they're like cockroach.
Oh, man,
Here.
just as an aside, I actually had Randy Roach on Facebook, and I think this is just completely off topic, listeners. Um, I was saying it's a damn shame that book 3 was so small, and there was even a suggestion of a book 4. But unfortunately, Randy went blind, and his last book was pretty much verbally done into a computer, and then a researcher came along and took his words and turned it into a book. And
Oh,
I'm like, I had to apologize, bless. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, Randy. I didn't understand. I just wish you hadn't then, because the stuff you've written is so fucking awesome. And it really is. I've read it a couple of times. It's unusual for me to go back and reread his stuff. It's shit. And the research that he did for that book, and specifically with regards to the nutritional stuff, was right up there. He's kind of sort of, he's not turned the stone over and shown you the dirty underside, but he really sort of made sure you got to see everything there was to see, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Hence the Muscle, Smoke, and Mirrors reference for the
I
books.
wonder,
So
like,
yeah, he's still with us. He just can't write anymore, bless him, because he's gone blind, and
yeah.
he's of that
I
age
wonder
where
if
it's that
his,
much more difficult to learn. Yeah,
but I wonder if his ancestors like used to kill roaches for a living or something. That's why he got the last
yeah,
name Roach. Like,
yeah.
because usually like they name people's last names based on like their profession. Like
I've been reading
Baker.
a book called Command and Control, Steve, which is about the atomic bombs, etc., missiles and stuff in the States. And I forget sometimes with America just how Polish, and German, and French, and English, and Dutch, and whatever else the mix of ethnicities in them. The names I can't even pronounce all the fucking names because this is in the 70s and 80s when these guys are in the book. It's about the whole silo stuff. So yeah, but yeah, listen, Randy was explaining that the industry as a whole, specifically the formulation companies. I'm thinking of the early protein stuff and I forget this particular person's name when it comes to the protein side of things, Steve, but he had to go and ask for a particular form of protein to be produced. No one else was producing that. I think Bob Hoffman was doing something called protein for the seas, which was kind of like the fishy cat food. It was disgusting. And Weeder's stuff was fucking skim milk powder and sugar. And this particular person went away and got the real shit made and spoke to the formulation companies. That stuff's difficult. And it's just an insight into how the industry is. Listen, Needtobuildmuscle that do HCGenerate are fucking hardcore and produce a solid product. And I challenge the listeners, we finish the show, to do the side-by-side comparison with a $50 and a $30 product. It's just no comparison. And if you're very lucky, you might get one solid ingredient properly dosed. And I mean very lucky. And I can think of one UK company. The rest of the ingredients can't be because they can't afford to make any fucking money on that product at $30, $50 without the ingredients just not being up to scratch. So that's the reason why it's priced at the price it is, and that's the reason why it works, because it's full of effective ingredients that can show to work at the same fucking dose or better than in the study and of the right fucking form. That is super, super important. Let us know what you think. Have you got any suggestions on PCT? Is there anything that you disagree with that we've done on the show? Let us know what your thoughts are on the subject. We'll also open up to input from the listeners. And if you like what we've done, share. If you don't like, tell us why, so that we can improve our shows and go forward and keep giving you great information. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinion is ours. It is our view and based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.